Well, it's not just one Brit. We're actually on British Takeover here. Right, thank you, everybody. Yeah, it's a British and a London takeover, but don't worry, everything we are talking about here is going to be very much a global perspective of short wins for long gains. So, look, by means of a quick introduction, I'm Oliver Lewis. I'm CEO, global CEO and founder of The Fifth. We are an influence agency, so very much the experts in the room, we hope, on influencer marketing, social creative, and I think most importantly, culture. And culture is going to feature quite a lot, I think, in what we need to talk about today, because inherently for our clients, for brands that we work with, we're helping them to hone their cultural fluency. And to do that, it comes from an inherent understanding of that culture today is normed, formed, and shaped primarily on social. And therefore, to understand social and understand how your audiences are engaging, and I think in 2024, and as we found out over the course of this week, how content creators are creating content that ultimately is shaping the conversation, is driving commerce, creativity, and indeed helping brands to build communities. So, enough of me. You really want to hear from Kat, because what we have here is one of the four leaders, certainly in the UK and EMEA market, but in the global strategy division of YouTube, leading social and influencer, and has been at the forefront of the evolution of YouTube Shorts and the strategy and the battleground for short-form content. So we are going to start there, but I'll let Kat briefly introduce herself, about your journey and what you currently are doing with YouTube in the short space.
Hi. Sorry, two British people here. I'll make sure I enunciate everything. But I'm Kat. I've been at Google for 9 years and 4.5 of them at YouTube. I lead social and influencer for UK and EMEA, so really plugged into the global team, really working on kind of bigger global strategies across shorts marketing, creator marketing, brand marketing, primarily working with social and influencers, but plugging into every PA. Previous to that, at Google, I launched the influencer program for the Google Pixel phone. So it's evolved a lot, and it's obviously become big, but we were really a challenger brand when we launched originally in 2016, and we had no budget. So my story there was really about getting people organically to use the phone, cool people, cultural change makers, the 10, 20,000s micro influencers without budget, which has changed now, thank God, because we don't advise that.
Thankfully.
So originally I joined Google to set up the influence program for Pixel. And previous to that, actually a bit of a gear change outside of kind of tech marketing. I actually worked as a journalist, loosely termed. I was at Cosmopolitan magazine. And originally when I joined, really wanted to be a journalist, which I guess was the influencer of the 2000s, and got a job at Cosmo, found that the monthly deadlines of a magazine just were not moving quick enough for me. And as they started their website, which feels crazy to think that they were starting that in 2007, I very quickly moved over and just really took charge on leading their social presence. And that's kind of how I got into social, how I found my love for creators and bloggers, as we then called them, who had their kind of WordPress and their Tumblrs. And we really worked with how we could engage them within the magazine. And so, I kind of fell into the world of social and influencers through my hunger, I guess, to make a name for myself in the publishing space, and very quickly found that I was just really drawn to the creativity of social and influencer content.
And a perfect encapsulation, really, the evolution of journalist into content creator yourself, really, and the influence that the Fifth Estate has now on culture and the world. But look, we're going to try and decode short-form content, because you were pivotal, Kat, in launching YouTube Shorts. I mean, it's fair to say that maybe in 2021, TikTok thought they had short-form content wrapped up. Of course, Google, YouTube thought differently. And the phenomenal rise of shorts is really quite something. And I think that the stats bear it out. Let me give you a couple. I mean, now coming into 2024, the number of channels on YouTube uploading shorts content grew by 50% last year. So the idea that YouTube is predominantly a long-form storytelling vehicle is dramatically shifting. YouTube Shorts now averaging over 70 billion daily views, being watched by over 2 billion logged-in users every month. So it's obviously a very important part of YouTube's strategy moving forward. can we just quickly start, and maybe we just demystify, because I'm certain everyone here is familiar with YouTube Shorts, but maybe it's worth us just quickly explaining what YouTube Shorts is and why it's been important, and why you felt, particularly why YouTube felt that it was an important battleground in the development of the platform.
Yeah, so, just starting out, I'm not a Shorts product manager here, but Shorts has been so integral to the growth of YouTube over the past few years, and we worked really, really closely with the team to make sure that we had the right creators, the right content, quality content on Shorts when it launched, and we've continued to kind of work with them very closely and hand in hand over the last few years. But I think everybody noticed a real change in the viewing habits of people, and looking at our audience behavior, we found that actually younger demographics were more drawn towards kind of shorter, bite-sized content, that kind of instant gratification of the vertical video, and we knew that we had to play in that space. But we also know that long form video is just unparalleled in how you can build a community, like a community that advocates for you, which is a very, very different feel to the kind of quick swipes that you get on short form video. And so it was really building something for a new audience. The Shorts audience, actually, you tend to find a lot of creators tell us that when they're looking at their data, their Shorts audience is actually completely different to their long form video audience. So what it is just really kind of catering to the changing way in which definitely the younger demographic is consuming content on mobile and on the go. So Shorts is not taking over YouTube. Shorts is one part in the kind of multi-channel experience that you get from that one app. So you can go in, you can engage with the long form. Maybe that pushes you into Shorts that are related to the long form. Then you can go back to a live stream. You can do your podcast. You can actually do everything. And then that, as an experience as a user, maybe you have a different reason for viewing something on your YouTube via your connected TV versus YouTube on your phone when you have 10 minutes in between something in your day, versus when you actually want to sit down and engage with a creator that you love.
I mean, look, so let's talk a little bit about that, because from a brand strategy perspective, you've got a full ecosystem now. I mean, driving growth of YouTube Shorts was incredibly important in order to build that established aspect of the platform and audience. But now, how do brands navigate the intersection between the different sides of YouTube in order to build a brand strategy? Because you ultimately, do you want to focus solely on building a Shorts-led audience, a la TikTok 2022, or actually is the real power in the breadth of long form content storytelling, how these two can work together?
Yeah, I would say as a brand, thinking about how you integrate with YouTube, it really depends on how your team is set up and how you're resourced. So if you aren't able to be consistent with, posting on Shorts or creating short form video content, and you haven't got a team, there are better ways. You can still engage with the product without actually posting on it as a brand. So there's kind of a couple of ways you can think about it. And honestly, chatting to my team, I don't know if there are any brands that I've found that are doing it really, really well. But there is one brand which actually really stood out to us, which is, I think, actually just probably UK only, but it's a chain called Foot Asylum, and they are essentially a trainer shop or a sneaker shop, and they basically just handed their channel over to YouTube creators. So those YouTube creators, they found the people who embody the voice of their brand, and they're creating the content, they're creating the Shorts, creating the long form. They're content creators full time, so they're doing it, they're putting the message out there. So I think that's a really good way of a brand saying, actually, your audience is the audience we want, so you create something that sits on our channel, and people love it. And the fans of those creators now have a very strong affinity with this sneaker brand because of the integration they've done with creators. So I think as a brand, the best way to think about it is, if you are set up to do short form video, then absolutely. If you are not, then think about how you can bring creators and influencers in to be your content producers for you, or to integrate your brand within their channels. And I think that's really important.
And actually, I mean, look, and you look after all of social and influencers. So the role that creators have played in building Shorts and the YouTube brand specifically, how important has that been to you? And why, frankly? I mean, ultimately, is it just about fueling an amount of content within the platform, or does it do more for the brand?
Yeah, I think maybe I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but even as YouTube, we work really, really closely with creators to actually come up with the content that they think is right. So actually what we do is identify people who are successful on shorts, who are posting regularly, really important. If they're not posting regularly, then then maybe don't have the data. So what you actually find is when you speak to creators, like creators who are successful, they are successful for a reason because they are looking deeply at their analytics. They're testing. Maybe they're posting the same trend or whatever they're doing in 5 different formats on shorts so that they can look at, okay, what performed better? What's the retention rate? Oh, I'm noticing people are dropping off at, 3 seconds before the end. Why is that? How can I change that? And there's some great, Mr. Beast, I think, really paved the way for this. But there's so many creators who are actually openly talking about this now that like they study their videos to this level of detail. And if they're noticing that 40% of people are dropping off 1 second before the end, they're working out how they can fix that because that ultimately changes their engagement. So you have these creators who are testing outside of the confines of like, the corporate rules that we probably all have to play with brands of what you can post and how much you can post. So I would say like leaning into creators to create shorts and tell you as a brand like what would work on that channel is really the most important thing.
Are we looking there for an evolution of creativity brand side, particularly when it comes to building audiences and communities on social, where creators should have more of the reins? And from your experience, how do you navigate that? And what's critically important in 2024 to remember when you're working with creators at that level of trust and at that velocity?
Yeah, I think there's one thing which actually obviously we did with the guys at the Fifth, so shameless plug for you guys, but I love it. We set up something last year called the Trends Incubator, and basically the Trends Incubator was just 10 of our influencers, and this was in the UK, and I know they've run similar programs elsewhere, but it was 10 shorts creators who we'd worked with before. They're very frequent posters. They're posting all the time. They've seen phenomenal growth. They have a really strong Gen Z audience. And so when we have something that we want to take to market, or we have a music label come to us and say, hey, we have this new launch and we want to try and do something around it or try and make something trend or pop off, what we were doing previously is we were all sat in a room, millennial and boomers, being like, hey, let's think of a trend and putting stuff out in the world. And it just honestly wasn't landing. And we have all the internal YouTube data and we're like, why can we not get this right? But ultimately, what we ended up doing was moving this. So when we had something that we kind of wanted to get out in the world and, okay, maybe it was a trend we want people to jump on, we would create a brief. We would send it to our trusted small group of creators and we would ask them to come back with, okay, this is the song or this is the moment, how would you make that into a trend? Or like, maybe give them a theme, and the brief is really open. And what's really interesting is they all came back with stuff that was very lo-fi, stuff that we would never think to put forward because we would maybe create something a bit more polished. But they were all coming back with similar themes. And so it's like, okay, this was different to what we would pick as marketers, but they had all picked up on the same hook from, whatever the theme was. So, yeah, I think putting it in the hands, and then they would come back to us and say, okay, this is how we think it would play out. And then we would, take it to the team and we would get them to create all the examples and the briefs. So that's one way of doing it. And then, yeah, I think it's really just having a really strong brief when you're working with influencers will be what gets you success. You have to trust that the creators, when they're sending you, their short or whatever they're doing, they know what works for their audience. So you just have to trust them and not play with it too much. But the important thing is you get that brief in so you can hit all of the points that they need to hit in the video, but you have to trust them to deliver it in the way that works for them.
There's a parallel there to some of the themes we've heard this week around who is responsible for our understanding, identifying cultural trends across social and how brands can authentically either lean in, jump on, or avoid. Right, and what's the key to that? Is it ultimately there's trust in the creators, but is it also about the people in your teams?
Yes. Oh my God, I'm a big believer that you either need to hire a young team, and you need to know that you will not understand some of the ideas that they come back with, and that's kind of means it will work. I am too old to understand some of the stuff that's coming at 37. So you just have to trust the younger people that they are spending time in this platform. They know what works and it will not make any sense to you. And then in a world of restrained resources, which is, a current situation for everybody at the minute. I think just really pushing your agencies to make sure they are diverse. And when I say diverse, it's like in every single way, but also in aid. If you want to hit a social audience and you want to work with short form video and influencers, you need to have people in your agency team or in your own team that are under 25, honestly.
And from a trend perspective, what's the life cycle of a trend, generally speaking? I mean, how long do you have before you can lean in? And most importantly, if you decide to lean in, do you participate in those trends, or do you just add to the conversation, or is it about creating content to support it? Because I think there's a lot of desire to move with movements, but how do you know when it's right to jump in and at what level?
The life cycle is short, honestly. And as a brand, if you find something that resonates, that perfectly suits your brand, you've got to jump on it quick. And it's got to be clever. There's a very fine line between clever and cringe. And you will get called out for it if you jump on something and it doesn't land. But I think as a brand, you can participate in a trend without actually creating the content. So maybe you're in the comment section as a brand. Definitely recommend you do that, by the way. I cannot tell you the millions and millions of engagements that we as YouTube are getting just from being in the comment section of shorts. And it's just grown massively over the last year in terms of in the comment section. So yeah, as a brand, I think you've got to jump on it quickly. So to jump on it quickly, you've got to have people who are identifying it and they're in the social platforms natively. And you have to kind of trust that if that younger person on your team or your agency brings something to you, you might not get it. It might not make sense for you. And you have to be comfortable with testing. It's short form video. It's a testing ground. It's a great space you can try something. You can try a slightly tweaked version of it and post it 2 days later. The algorithm is totally cool with that. If you want to post something, post a slightly edited version, try another slightly edited version 2 days after that and another 2 days after. It's absolutely fine. And it will actually give you great insights. So yeah, if you're going to jump on it, make sure it's relevant, make sure it's quick. And if you don't have that capacity, then work out where it makes sense for you to be in the comments.
Just leaning quickly onto that before we move on to another area, but creatively, how important is it that your strategy is born from a social out perspective and not actually, and particularly because YouTube has traditionally been quite famous for driving views on longer form or TV creative, frankly, and therefore a lot of when Shorts was launched, there was kind of an immediate reaction to use it as a cut down promotional
Please
tool.
don't do that, guys.
Yeah, right, here we go. That's what I was getting to. So what is the recommendation for how you intersect those two pieces of content?
Yeah, so I think, you guys will all know if you work in marketing, really brands have just dumped their ads on YouTube, and it's not what we recommend, honestly. But, in another sense, people do go to YouTube to watch ads. Oh, did you see that great ad? Oh, I haven't seen it. You go to YouTube, you look it up. So there's absolutely a place for ads to live there so people can search for them, especially Super Bowl ads. I mean, the views on those on YouTube are crazy. But Shorts is different. It's a different audience. So you have to think about it differently. And there's some really nice tools now where actually you can link to a long form from a Shorts. You can also actually, which is really interesting, people can clip, if you turn this on, they can clip part of your long form to make Shorts from it and remix the audio if you allow them to do so. So I think there's a really interesting way to think about how can you encourage people and what's your call to action in your long form that they can take parts of that and remix it and work with it. But yeah, please don't just post ads on Shorts, because what we're seeing right now for the space that it's in, it's not that. It's creative first. So we've done it. We've posted stuff that I personally wouldn't post from YouTube, not under my watch, obviously. But I would just say, if you want to kind of do your big branded videos on YouTube, it works. If you're going to do Shorts, you've got to think creative first. You've got to look at the audience. It's a totally different audience who's viewing your long form and your Shorts, and it's also a completely different audience, and they want different things from what they're getting from other social platforms. So,
including TikTok, right? I mean, it still has a distinct difference? Because again, there was a trend around just, certainly in the early days, with sharing content between platforms. How have you seen that evolve and change? Is there very much now an evolution of short-specific content strategy?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. Like, listen, I'm not silly. I know that people were like, "Oh, well, Shorts is here. Let's just take all of my content from TikTok and I'll just download it all and I'll just post it all on Shorts." But it's really interesting because the same content doesn't necessarily like blow up. You could have one piece of content that will go viral on one platform and then it just doesn't land on Shorts and vice versa. And also I think people want different things from like the lengths of the videos they're watching based on what platforms. Like YouTube is primarily a sound on platform. You know, not every platform is sound on. And so people engage with content in completely different ways. So the best thing is test. I think it's difficult. It's more platforms thinking about kind of what do you post on one? Can you have a different strategy for one by the other? But again, it just comes from posting, testing. I think also really important to remember, Shorts is under 60 seconds, whereas other platforms is longer. Well, we have long form. Shorts is a different thing.
Average length of the most successful Shorts content?
So everyone is different, but I was actually listening to a really interesting podcast with a creator yesterday, and she was like, my ideal video length is 34 seconds, and I make all of my videos 34 seconds because that's how much my audience on Shorts wants to engage. And she knows that from like very vigorous testing. She's like, 34 seconds, they don't want to spend anything longer. So yeah, it depends, but it also depends how you keep them hooked and engaged throughout.
That's great. Well, let's change a beat because we can't talk about creator and social in 2024 without the evolution of measurement, right? We are in a state where we need to move beyond vanity metrics, where reach, baseline engagements really aren't enough to tell the story about how certainly the role that creators are having in a much more full funnel marketing activity. Therefore, you know, we at The Fifth are very, very focused on delivering creative effectiveness and brand overlay. Certainly now using AI in order to demonstrate that not every impression, that on every click, particularly on social, is of the same value. How are YouTube looking at that? And I know you've done your own work in this space, particularly to understand the value proposition from a creator perspective on YouTube. I mean, could you just tell us a little bit about that campaign from your perspective and why it's been important?
Yeah, I think, like, honestly, 2 years ago, I was so happy that anybody just wanted to give our influencer team like money. I would just take the money and be like, sure, I'll run an influencer campaign for you, because it's, you know, people were starting to come to us with budgets, and I was like, okay, I want to show them what I can do. But then we were kind of getting to the end of the year, and I was pitching like, hey, we need to do this again next year. And you realize that saying like, okay, we drove this many impressions and this many engagements, this cost per view, which is like much lower than the media campaign. We were kind of getting hit with it. No, it's really cool, but how has it really shifted what we need as a business against our OKRs? Like, okay, this content's cool. It's reaching loads of people. People are loving it. Great. But I don't really get what that's doing for me and my PA in a world where, you know, we are being more mindful of budgets. Like, how can we influence that? And so we really had to shift internally to think about moving away from vanity metrics. Listen, they're very important. You need to know how many views, engagements, like what's the engagement rate? Do people like it? Are they sharing it? That's very important. But to get budget to do the same again the following year, you have to have a more integrated measurement approach to how you do this. So obviously the value proposition campaign, we worked with creators to essentially share a message that we as YouTube have always shared around the value proposition of the platform. And it just wasn't really landing when we were putting these big branded YouTube ads out. So we worked with around 75 creators in the UK and France to do a campaign basically where the creators would talk about their authentic journey of the value proposition of YouTube. So great, we put boosts behind it. We had over 100 million views. We had this great level of engagement. But we needed something different. And I think we needed something more because we had, you know, like a heavy, we were asking for a 7-figure investment for 2024. So what we actually did is made sure that, and I think this is really important, and this is what we're doing for all of our influencer and kind of social work in 2024. Anything we're doing, we need to have the right investment from that PA to basically show the impact on the brand. So whether that's like behavioral metrics, like we know that people who viewed this have then gone on to create more content on YouTube, or perception metrics, and looking at things like sentiment. So like some of the work we did around comment analysis. Who are the people in the comments? Are they actually creators who are seeing this stuff and commenting and engaging? What's the perception uplift, like exposed versus non-exposed? It is an investment, especially when you're looking at adding, additional budget on top. But taking that budget into that space will get you kind of 10x the following year. So it's the first time we've ever really been working in this way to this level. And I think just trying to educate your team on why, if they're going to invest X amount of money in influencers, they also need to invest X amount of money to make sure you can solely prove the impact of that thing, not that thing and others, like specifically social and influencers.
And that's very much what our core message is at the moment, is the investment into the creativity in the media will always be paramount, but actually not investing into the measurement principles that will help you to prove that ROI will be a failing this year. I mean, from our perspective, it's investing in building an econometric model that allows influencer and social to be benchmarked properly against TV, because that's ultimately where the investment should be coming from in order to fuel a much more successful influencer program for our brands.
Also, I think like understanding something versus media. I'm sure your like A&I teams at other brands will have so many reports on media campaigns and like, oh, this was the brand linkage, this was the brand attribution, this is how it changed perception. And so we tried to make sure that we had specific campaigns for social and influencer this year. And actually, we got so many learnings on how we had much better brand linkage and much better brand attribution from some of the influencer content we've been hosting on their channels than we did on some of the media content we've been putting out from our channels. And it's all just about being clever with how you do it.
Well, look, we're getting towards the end. I'd quite like to kind of move towards the future, if we can, and what you think is going to be the next battleground, particularly in the social space, but importantly, I think probably in the creator space. Because the world's now so incredibly entwined. I mean, TikTok has recently obviously launched their 10-minute video. That move kind of brings you both closer into the world. What are you thinking about next? And I guess, again, you're not product, and you probably can't talk about everything, but what, from your perspective, are you seeing as going to be really important in 2024 for creator and for YouTube?
Yeah, so I think, listen, just because a platform launches something, it doesn't necessarily mean that people will use it. And again, there's a place for every platform, right? People go to different platforms for different things, and that's fine. I think there's kind of a place for everything working together. But in terms of the future, honestly, I think the future is moving away from thinking of like, okay, well, we need to have these people with these million subscribers working with us, and actually makes it much more accessible, because I think, honestly, the future is, for want of a better term, micro-influencers, working with kind of creators and influencers at scale to create your content for you and to relay your brand messaging. It's, that's a smaller audience. It can actually sometimes be most effective. And there was actually something like, famously, this really big creator who had 2 million subscribers who couldn't even sell, like 100 of these things she had created, versus somebody with 20,000 followers who will do something, drop something, sell out instantly because their community is supporting them and they're engaged. And I think the difference is community versus audience. And so I think a lot of brands maybe have built an audience, but like the future has to be community. And the new challenger brands are building community first. And the people who've been around for a while, us included, have spent years developing, an audience and are looking to move to community. So yeah, community, and also kind of micro influencers in those micro niches like PlantTube. I'm really into PlantTube. Or like, there's so many crazy little bubbles. Yeah, niches, micro influencers, and community. I'm not going to mention AI because I feel like it's AI bingo, but I don't know. We've got some really interesting things in the back end of YouTube, helping creators, assisting them to help them, give them ideas, and actually help them understand on-platform trends and how they might be able to participate in a way that's personalized for them. So,
just leaning onto your community point there, I read it. I mean, don't fact check me if anyone's from TikTok in here, but I heard the one subscriber on YouTube is worth over 25 TikTok followers. it is building that. It is shorts in particular as a sort of closing point on the short form content strategy, helping to build subscribers in the broader ecosystem, and is the message for marketers here leaving today thinking about YouTube to be thinking about the ecosystem and how it intersects with each other.
Yeah, listen, like you can do long form or short form. You can just do short form. You can just do long form. As I said, it is predominantly a lot of different audiences between the two different formats. So it really depends on like your team that you have set up, the budget that you can invest, the time, the team that you have available to you to create the content. So yeah, I mean, it's completely dependent. Every brand is at a different stage. But the great thing is if you don't have, I think people have only previously engaged with YouTube when they have these kind of big editing budgets. And the nice thing with shorts is you don't need that. So you can be somebody at home with just your phone and you can create something for your brand or your agency that resonates really well. So it just really kind of democratizes that space, lowers the barrier for creation, and you can just create everything within the app. So it really is just like lowering that barrier and giving you more chance to play and experiment. Like long form can be quite scary, I think, when you haven't really posted it before, like putting yourself and your brand out there in that way. So
just final point, we believe that short wins for long games.
Yes,
yeah, principally
definitely.
Fine.
Yeah.
Look, I think we've got time. We might have a couple of minutes if there's one question, and we can open it up. Does anyone have anything for Kat?
So, great session. Love the point about community versus audience. And I think YouTube has a really unique perspective, being the OG in the social and building a community game. I would love to hear you expand a little bit on why brands should be investing in taking it past audience and building a community and the multiplying, amplifying effects of doing that versus just focusing on short-term audience building. So we'd love to hear more about that.
Yes. So actually, I'm going to illustrate this point around community. One of the brands that I'm just going to call out is Ryanair. And I don't know how familiar everyone in the US is with Ryanair, but it's basically like a budget airline that basically was one of the first airlines to just bring these kind of very accessible fares for like through Europe. So you can kind of travel and fly for really cheap, but you get what you pay for. Lots of people flew as a necessity with them because they needed the cheap flights, but they really didn't like the brand. And so they were really the pioneers of changing how you think about audience and community with their social strategy, where they basically joined in with the haters of their brand on social. And they were kind of like, yeah, we are rubbish. And actually they were almost like creating this meme hilarious content and engaging and fighting with people in the comments in a way that no brand had ever done before, that people just loved them for it. And so I know we're kind of at time, but what you actually see now from that brand, for example, because they've just taken on that content really well, is people in the comments who complain about Ryanair, they've got 100 people commenting back to them, defending the brand, because what they've done is create this like really funny, relatable content that says like, we're with you and we understand you and we like reflect back what you think. So they've built this community who now they do all the hard work for them. They don't have to defend themselves because they've got people doing that for them. And so I think, yeah, as a brand, people expect community building at this stage.
My quick takeaway from all of that and from the thank you, Kat, and the conversation is that there is actually to participate and to build community outside, certainly within YouTube and even within Shorts, is not necessarily about the hero content itself, right? It's absolutely about showing up, being authentic and relatable within the comments and participating at the right time and matching the tone. And I think that's interesting because predominantly you would just drive everything in towards having a well-established content strategy and not a community strategy.
Yeah, you can't broadcast, you have to engage. And yeah, really interestingly, one of the things they did is take away their high production, and they actually really lent into kind of lo-fi content. Like they'd look at something, they're like, "This is too high production," and they would actually be like, "Remove that, take that out." Like, actually, let's not even put any text. Let's just reply to them with the picture, because that's how their audience was using social, and they just became kind of like one of them fighting the good fight with them, essentially. So yeah, I think it all comes down, as I said, to your teams and your agencies being in that space, being the audience. You can't sit in a room with people who are not the target audience and come up with these ideas. It needs to be people who are like you, who you're trying to reach.
That's a beautiful close. Kat, thank you. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks everyone for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the week.